mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington.
Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuat. It's Monday, January 16th. This is Africa 54.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen departs this week on a 10-day visit to Africa to highlight and strengthen economic ties with the continent. Examining the legacy of civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. And U.S. President Joe Biden faces scrutiny over the handling of classified documents. We'll have a report. All this and more on today's Africa 54.
We begin in East Africa, where the Somali government is reporting that its forces have captured 2 towns previously controlled by terrorist group Al-Shabaab in central Galmudug state. Defense Minister Abdul Qadir Mohammed Nul told VOA Somali that government forces and local fighters seized Hararder and Galkad after the militant fled without a fight. Hararder is a key coastal town and a former private hub. It was the biggest and most strategic town in Galmudug that was still in the hands of Al-Shabaab. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is preparing to embark on a 10-day visit to Africa. Yellen's trip to Senegal, Zambia, and South Africa is aimed at highlighting and strengthening economic ties with the continent. VOA's Mariama Diallo has more.
And I'm eager to visit your continent. As I told some of you, you invited me to your countries. I said, be careful what you wish for.
President Joe Biden acted on a promise he made last month at the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington. He's sending U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to Senegal, Zambia, and South Africa in the next 2 weeks to strengthen economic ties with the continent. Cameron Hudson is a senior associate with the Center for Strategic and International Studies Africa program.
And this is, I think, the first of hopefully many steps to engage Africans on the continent. But there's an overall message, I think, that they're trying to send as well, which is that Washington is present. And that message is not only for the Africans, but it's for Chinese, it's for Russians competing with the United States in these markets.
Senior Treasury officials say the purpose of the trip is to learn from and exchange ideas with African government officials, private sector leaders, entrepreneurs, and youth to deepen economic ties between the U.S. and Africa and chart out new opportunities for trade and investment. First stop will be Senegal to meet with President Macky Sall, the African Union chair, whose country is also a strong member of the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS. This is an opportunity for Sall to discuss unfair international trade practices, says Chisanga Chekwe, president of the Canada-based Masomo Education Foundation charity.
Among the foremost efficient cotton producers in the world are Benin, Burkina Faso, Chad, and Mali. 3 of these countries are in ECOWAS, and all 4 are in the AU. Here's an interesting thing. Despite their efficiency, they only contribute 3% to world cotton production. The reason for that is cotton production is heavily subsidized and really tends to distort markets.
Chekwe is also the author of books on African issues, especially in Zambia, where he says America sees an opportunity to counter Chinese influence with a new government considered pro-West.
It is seen as a government that is wary of China. One possible area of immediate cooperation is a restructuring of the $6 billion debt that Zambia has to China. And let's remember that makes up about 25% of the country's GDP.
In 2020, Zambia became the first African country in the pandemic era to default on its debt. But whether money is owed to China or financial institutions, Zambia is not the only African country with a debt burden, says Hudson.
Ghana, another, I think, very successful African country, really experiencing, a mounting crisis there. And so Washington is seen as partly responsible because, like it or not, Washington is seen as controlling the international financial institutions of the World Bank and the IMF, which have, pushed for more austerity measures on African states, kept interest rates for international lending very high to African states, and at the same time have been very critical of concessionary lending that they've received from China and Russia and others outside of the multilateral system.
The U.S. Treasury Secretary met with Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema at the summit last month, telling him that she was looking forward to talking about the international financial institutions' role in supporting Zambia's economic recovery and the need to work on a debt treatment for Zambia under the Common Framework, an initiative endorsed by the G20, as quickly as possible. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
U.S. President Joe Biden visited what he calls America's Freedom Church Sunday to mark Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Biden says that democracy was at a perilous moment and Americans should look up to MLK's legacy for guidance.
Are we a people who will choose democracy over autocracy? Couldn't ask that question 15 years ago. Everyone thought democracy was settled, not for African Americans, but democracy as an institutional structure was settled. But it's not. It's not. We have to choose a community over chaos. Are we the people who are going to choose love over hate? These are the vital questions of our time and the reason why I'm here as your president. I believe Dr. King's life and legacy show us the way and we should pay attention.
The president cited the question that King himself once asked of the nation, where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Well, my message to the nation on this day is we go forward. We go together. When we choose democracy over autocracy, a beloved community over chaos, when we choose believers in the dreams, to be doers, to be unafraid, always keeping the faith.
Go ahead. I couldn't hear. All right, sorry. Biden delivered a Sunday morning sermon at King Ebenezer Baptist Church, the U.S. the first president in the United States to do so. For more on Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday and how it's being marked, VOA's, I got in the studio here with me, Melvin Foote. He is the president and CEO of Constituency for Africa. It's very good to have you right here with me in the studio, Melvin. Thank you very much. And let's start out by you telling us how you're remembering this very significant day of Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, I think it's good for the country. It's good for the world. Martin Luther King was an icon. And I was like 17 years old when he died. And I recall how we felt. He was the one who lifted us up. So we have to remember him. We have to really praise the things that he achieved. I think it's important for us as a country. I think it's important for the world.
You know, you, like so many other Americans, have visited the memorial site, and you've seen a lot of people coming around, all through the weekend. What do you see and what do you feel when you are at the site of his memorial?
Well, I'm in Washington, so I go there. I'm a runner, so I go past there just about every day. And every time I go there, I always bow down and pay homage to Martin Luther King. It's good. I think our country needs healing. Our country needs unity. And Martin Luther King certainly represented that. Judge us not by our looks or what you think about us, judge us by our character and what we actually do. And I think some of the things that he stood for and all of his remarks are on the walls of the memorial. I think it's good for America. I think it's good for all of us.
There have been so many movements about, justice in the United States, justice around the world. What do you think Martin Luther King's message would be had he been alive today?
I think he would say that we got a lot of work ahead. It was not going to begin or end with him. We're talking about the next 100 years. I think we have to change who we are as human beings. I mean, I look at this country and I say, look at our legacy toward the American Indians. Look at our legacy toward Black Americans. Look, you know, we have to correct this stuff. If we're going to go forward with humanity, we got to correct this stuff. All of us are human. All of us are entitled to food and water and shelter and security. All of us, whether you're black, yellow, white, brown, or whatever. I think King would say there's a lot of work ahead, so we must educate the young ones coming up because they got to take the baton and carry it forward.
You know, when you look around the world and just remembering the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit that just ended the other day and the president here saying that Africa needs to be on the table and needs to be a permanent member of the G20, I'm just wondering what Martin Luther King's message would be today for the world as well.
I would think he would be happy about a lot of stuff. He would be happy about what President Biden did toward the summit. He would be happy about that. But he would not say, let's stop here and celebrate and go home. Let's use this as a platform to go forward. Let's change how we deal with Africa. Let's change how we transform the world. Let's change, because we have to, he would be a unifying for all humankind.
Okay, now I'm going to move you back to a story we just heard with our reporter Mariama Diallo about Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen going to visit the continent. She's going to be in Senegal. She's also going to go to Zambia as well as South Africa. What are your thoughts about this trip and of what significance is it to the continent of Africa?
Well, I'm happy about it. I don't know her personally, but I said, okay, the Treasury Secretary going to Africa is a big deal. I think she's going there to follow up on the summit. So it doesn't just get away. And tell the Africans that this is not about just having a big party. This is about some serious work going ahead. So the Africans have to also respond. My disappointment with Africa, quite frankly, when all the leaders came to Washington, they came by themselves. They didn't meet before they came here. They all came here on their own airplanes. They didn't call the diaspora up and say, what do you think we can get out of the Biden administration? I would have told them, come with 4 things. And Mr. Biden, we have 4 things we're asking you for. You know, A, B, C, D. They would have left with 2 of those, the 3rd one by the end of this year. But they didn't do that. So they came, Gambia, talking about come to Gambia. Burundi say, come to Burundi. Come on. Africans need to come better organized to deal with the United States.
Perhaps they should have discussed this at the African Union level. All right, Mel, thank you so much for your perspective on MLK and on the Treasury Secretary heading to the continent of Africa. Melvin Foote is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Constituency for Africa. And now we're going to head down to Washington, D.C., where my colleague Ignatius Ano is at the memorial. Ignatius, you've been talking to a lot of people today. What are they telling you about how they are marking Martin Luther King Jr.'s Memorial Day?
Thank you so much, Esther, for having me. You know, just right behind me is a memorial, and just beside it is an inscription out of a mountain of a despair, a stone of hope. So locals in this country are celebrating and commemorating, essentially reflecting on this particular day with hope. But they also have a request, which is very simple. It's for Congress to ensure that they pass the John Lewis Advancement Rights and then the Freedom to Vote Right Bill. It's a call that President Biden has also made. And as African Americans and indeed citizens from across all 50 states gather here at the memorial to reflect on the legacy of the late Martin Luther King Jr., that's also one thing that is very key on their hearts, because they're saying that essentially it would help make sure that all citizens have a voice to decide the future of the United States of America. They're saying there's still an unfinished business left to be done, although the country has come far as far as dealing with racial and economic inequality is concerned. Again, there's still much more to be done. The executive has done their part. It is now time for the legislature to show the political will in ensuring that folks in this country have a huge say as far as the direction of the country is concerned, Esther.
So, Ignatius, I'm sure you've talked to a number of people right there. I can see you're surrounded by so many at the memorial site.
I am actually.
What is the resonating message from those who are right there with you?
Well, for them, it is togetherness. It is that the humankind is one. You know, Esther, initially, just before coming on the air, there was an event that was held by the Memorial Foundation, and we had the Honorable Linda Thomas Greenfield, who is the United Nations ambassador to the UN, and of course, some children of Dr. Martin Luther King also addressed the gathering. And one of the key things that they both kept, pressing on was to lead with empathy and to lead with kindness. They say if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was still around today, that's something that he would have preached. That's something that he would have seen the U.S. Continue to embody as a country that welcomes people from, the African continent and indeed across the world, Esther. So it's a celebration of hope, and it's a celebration of togetherness and see the human race as one kind.
Ignatius, I'm sure you'll be going to celebrate right there. I saw a lot of hands waving at us right here in the studio. Thank you so much for your excellent reporting, Ignatius.
You're very welcome, Esther. Thank you so much for having us.
Right. Ignatius Anol is our reporter, reporting live for us right there from the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Site. Still to come, a Los Angeles Youth Orchestra honors America's champion of the civil rights movement. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Turning to other news, the spokesman for South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he will no longer attend the World Economic Forum in Davos due to the ongoing energy crisis in the country. Power cuts have worsened since struggling state utility Eskom said it would implement its worst ever outages until further notice. Firefighters in Senegal say 19 people were killed Monday when a bus and a truck collided in northern Senegal. This accident comes 8 days after a smash-up between two buses left 40 people dead. Ghanaian Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta tweeted on Monday that the country is again extending the deadline to register for its domestic debt exchange to January 31st in order to build a consensus among its stakeholders. U.S. President Joe Biden is facing scrutiny into whether he mishandled classified documents. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias reports on why both Republicans and Democrats agreed that the ongoing investigation into the matter is necessary.
A high-profile visit to Atlanta to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy didn't distract from a newly announced probe by a special counsel into President Joe Biden's handling of classified documents.
Classified material next to your Corvette? What were you thinking?
I'm going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon.
6 pages of classified documents were found recently at his private library. Batches were also found at his Wilmington, Delaware home and the Penn Biden Center in Washington. The situation has been compared to the discovery of more than 300 documents, some with top secret markings, at former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. A special counsel has also been appointed to investigate that matter. While pointing out key differences with Trump's case, Democratic Representative Adam Schiff told ABC this week the Biden investigation is appropriate.
I'd like to know what these documents were. I'd like to know what the IC's assessment is, whether there was any risk of exposure and what the harm would be and whether any mitigation needs to be done.
The White House says it will cooperate with the investigators who seek to understand if there was any intent into breaking the law rather than merely negligence. Also on ABC, Republican Representative Don Bacon highlighted the potential risks of anyone, regardless of party affiliation, mishandling sensitive information.
And having top secret, special compartmented information in your garage or your resort or in an area where Chinese nationals have access, it's all wrong. And we shouldn't just be pointing fingers at the other side.
It would be a crime rather than a security violation if President Biden knowingly removed and stored classified documents without authorization. On NBC's Meet the Press, former U.S. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein explained what to expect of the judicial process, given that a sitting president cannot be indicted.
The special counsel should evaluate the facts and the law, look at Department of Justice policies, and make a recommendation to the Attorney General about whether or not prosecution is warranted. Then it's up to the Attorney General to make the decision whether to apply that DOJ policy.
Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, who over the weekend stood side by side with President Biden in Georgia, told ABC one thing is certain.
No one is above the law. So I'm glad to see the Justice Department doing its work, and we ought to let that work proceed.
On its side, the Republican-led House Committee on Oversight and Accountability wants the White House to provide a visitor log for President Biden's residence, documents, and communications related to the locations searched. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
Los Angeles-based conductor Charles Dickerson is convinced that every metropolitan area with a big African-American population should have a classical youth orchestra to help take local kids off the streets. He created the largest majority black youth orchestra in the U.S. Genia Dulot tells us more.
Every year, the celebration of Martin Luther King Day is very special for Holman United Methodist Church in South Los Angeles. Dr. King preached here in the month prior to his assassination in 1968. This year, at the church, the Inner City Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles is performing choral and orchestral setting of King's famous speech, I Have a Dream, and premiering a setting of Amanda Gorman's poem, The Hill We Climb.
Personally, it resonates because, as her words say, I am also a black girl that has descended from slaves, and it just marks or just paints a picture of how far we've come as a people and as a nation.
Charles Dickerson is the author of both settings. A professional conductor for over 40 years, he remembers how in the summer of 2009, young musicians from the South Los Angeles, known for its primarily African-American population, approached him, asking to create a youth orchestra.
There are youth orchestras all over the United States. Most of them are in suburbs. Most of them are in outlying areas, not in inner city areas. They're in areas where there is great wealth. They're in areas that are very Anglo. They're in areas that are not diverse, hardly in any possible way. They are really pretty much in areas that are somewhat affluent. There aren't youth orchestras in the middle of the ghetto, and that's where these young people live. And they can play. They can play just as well, if not better.
From 9 members 13 years ago, the Inner City Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles grew to 75 today. Being a nonprofit, the orchestra doesn't charge the players and can even provide them with instruments. They take musicians as young as 10 years old, but the core of the troupe is middle and high schoolers. In their portfolio, there are already a great number of high-profile performances.
I was playing for Michelle Obama. I was playing on the National Mall. I was playing at the Hollywood Bowl for the NFL. Like, so many amazing different things. I've met so many different people, important people, and I've gained so much performing experience.
Despite being the largest majority black orchestra in the United States, the troupe welcomes musicians of other ethnicities too.
This group has helped me develop into the man that I am. It has helped me become who I am and discover that I want to continue being a classical musician. The beautiful thing about this orchestra is that it is proof that no matter what your color of skin is, that you have an opportunity in classical music, whether you're brown, African American, and any color type, you are welcome.
Dickerson's vision for the future involves creating similar orchestras in every city in the U.S. with a substantial number of young black people. Currently, he is developing the Southside Chicago Youth Orchestra. Genia Dulot for VOA News, Los Angeles.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.
A dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood.
From around the world. Let's go.